Today we are going to be learning all about how to use our paint cups. So the first thing we need to talk about is what all we need to get from the painting studio for setup before we can start painting. So you're going to need a water bowl with water, paint brushes, whatever size or shape you think is going to be best for your idea, a washcloth, one of the tubs of paint cups, either the bright set or the basic set. You'll also need a placemat, paper, and then also any other tools. We'll talk about our tools later, but like sponges or rollers or scrapers. If you are planning to mix colors or to use any of the tools, you're also going to need a magazine palette, which I'm going to show you in just a second what those are for. Okay, so I have all my stuff for setup. I'm going to carefully take the lid off of my paint. Okay, all the paint cups stay inside this. We do not take them out. They can come out, but I do not want you to take them out. Okay. This paint is different than our tempera cakes and our watercolors because we don't need water for this paint to start working. It's already wet, it's ready to go. So all you're going to do is just dip your brush in, and then you are going to paint on your paper. Right? When we switch colors, we obviously need to rinse our brush out. So I'm just kind of doing a little design. When you need more paint, dip it back in. Make sure you're dipping it back in the same color if you didn't wash it. Okay, so I want a new color. I'm going to rinse my brush out. Tempera paint's a little harder to rinse out, so you've got to kind of make your paintbrush jump up and down in the water. That'll help rinse it out. Now, after you rinse it out, do not take your wet paintbrush and dip it back in the paint tray. We don't want to get any extra water in these. So what you need to do is to, after you rinse it off, you need to kind of squish it or dry it off with a washcloth like this. Whoops. Okay, so now my brush is nice and clean. I can go ahead and add another color. So I'm going to do yellow, dip, and start adding my other color. With our tempera paint, we should never have big blobs of color, like big puddles of color on our paper, because it'll just dry and it'll get flaky and it will not look very nice. So no big puddles, just nice even layers of paint. Okay, so that's how you use a brush with our paint cups. I'm going to show you how to use our tools next. So one tool we can use is a sponge. So what a sponge is for, a sponge is to kind of add a texture, which is really great for like backgrounds and things like that. So what you can do is you can take the sponge and you could carefully, if it fits, dip it into the paint cup, and then you can sponge it on. These sponges are a little bit big, so what you could also do, this is a mixing magazine. You can also take a scoop of paint and just put it right on the magazine. You can kind of spread it out just a little bit like that. And then you can dip your sponge into that instead. I think that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to dip my sponge in, and then you're going to press it on your paper. So when you sponge, you're going to kind of dab it up and down like this. So there's one color. I'm going to rinse my brush out. Make it jump up and down. Wipe it clean. Make sure all the water's out of it. I'm going to add another color. I'm going to add it right onto my mixing palette. Just like that. Put my brush in the water. I'm going to load my sponge up with that red paint, and then I can sponge right on top of that. So again, this makes a great background. Maybe you want to make a bunch of sponge painted paper, and then next week when it's dry, you could cut it into different shapes and use it for a collage. Okay, lots of different ways you can use that, the sponges. Whoops. Let's see, next tool is a scraper. So a scraper, let's see, I need a new piece of paper. A scraper is another way to add texture. So you're going to take a clean paintbrush, dry it off, and you are going to paint on your paper a kind of a solid area. So I'm going to use this lime green. So I'm going to paint back and forth. My brush is on its toes like this. And then before it dries, you're going to take your scraper and you're going to press down on it, and it's going to scrape away some of that paint to make a pattern. So then maybe you want to go another direction to make like a checkerboard. It's up to you. Okay, so that's a scraper. When you're done with the scraper, you can just wipe it on the washcloth to clean it off like that. Okay, last tool. This one's a little tricky. The sponge. Or I'm sorry, not the sponge, the roller. Okay, so these rollers, there's different designs on them. They make kind of a pattern. So these rollers obviously are not going to fit in the paint cups, so you've got to use a mixing magazine. I'm going to use a clean paintbrush, and I'm going to put some paint on the magazine. And I need enough paint to be able to roll the roller in it. So I'm kind of using my brush as a scoop and scooping just a little bit of paint on the magazine. Okay. And then you're going to use the roller. It's kind of like a paint roller. You're going to gently roll it in that paint. The whole roller should not be painted. Do you guys see how just the lines have paint on them now? The whole roller is not going to be your paint color, just the lines that stick out. So I have it loaded up, and then I'm just going to carefully press it on my paper like that. Okay, these are super fun. Maybe you want to rinse this out and add a different color or a different type of line. These are really, really fun. Okay, so we just learned how to paint with a brush with our tempera paints or our paint cups. We learned how to use a sponge. We learned how to use our scrapers, and we also learned how to use our rollers. Another thing you need to do, please, please, please wear art shirts when you are using this paint. It can get messy, and it's not very easy to wash out. Okay, that's it.